In this video, we're going to start to talk about this idea of factoring, which is actually one of the major topics in this class for this semester, and just kind of relating it to what we've done previously. So in previous videos, we've been looking at something like this, x plus 8 times x plus 2, right? And the idea was to multiply those together, right? So what we did was we did a double distribution. We took this first one, multiplied to there, and to there. And then we took the second one, the second piece, and multiplied to there and to there. Okay. Now I want to skip ahead a little bit, but if you do that correctly, you end up with this: x squared plus 10x plus 16. Okay. And that's what we were doing in previous videos. Now what we're going to try and do is how do we go from here and how do we go back to those groups? Okay, how do we go backwards? Okay, so that's the main topic for this video, is how to go backwards. And essentially that's what factoring is. Okay, factoring is taking a trinomial or something bigger, but right now we're going to focus on trinomials, taking that trinomial and breaking it down into those groups of parentheses. Okay, and that's what the term factoring actually means. So whenever I use this word factoring, okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to break into groups, okay? The reason why we're trying to do that is because also in one of our previous videos, we looked at the idea of zero product property, right? The idea that if it's in those groups and it's equal to 0, it's fairly easy to solve, right? So sometimes they'll give us the trinomial and we need to break it down before we can solve it, okay? And this idea of breaking into groups, and the formal terms, we're breaking it into its factors, hence the term factoring, okay? So let's take a look at how to actually do that. Now, there's a ton of ways to do factoring. A bunch of teachers have their own ways of doing things. I'm just going to show you the way that I've found that works the best, but I'll be showing you a couple different methods in several videos, okay? So the first thing we need to look at is making sure we know what standard form means, which is kind of what we've been doing previously. So standard form means it has to look in this format, right? So it has to be a x squared plus bx plus c, okay? Or in other words, it has to be from highest exponent down to lowest, which is what we've been doing in previous videos anyways, okay? We want to make sure it's in standard form because otherwise the method I'm going to show you right now doesn't work, okay? Now we're going to simplify it even further. Right now, I want to focus on just if it looks like this: x squared plus bx plus c. In other words, I'm saying that the a value, we're going to say that's 1 for now. Okay, later on I'll show you what to do if it's a different number. But right now, we're going to focus on what happens if it looks like this format: x squared plus bx plus c, okay? Now again, a bunch of teachers have their own ways of showing this. The method I usually show students first, I call it the X method, okay? And the reason why I call it an X method is because you literally start off by drawing an X on your paper, okay? By drawing an X on your paper, you see that there's 4 sections on there. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put whatever's in that C position, whatever number is in that C position, we're gonna put up top, up here, okay? So the C value goes up top, and then we're going to put that B value down below, okay? And the idea is we're looking for 2 numbers to put on the left side and the right side, 1 number on each side, okay? The question you need to ask yourself is, what numbers, or what two numbers, multiply to C and add or subtract to B. Okay? And once we know what those two numbers are, that's what's going to go on the left and the right. So again, it's what two numbers multiply to C, so put a little multiplication dot above, and then they also have to add and subtract to the B value, okay? Which is a little bit trickier than it sounds. Sometimes you have to play around with the numbers quite a bit, okay? But once you have those two numbers, you're essentially set. Okay, I want to put a little side note down here because it's very important you take account for this. The positives and negatives are going to be very important. So make sure you guys keep track of them. So positives and negatives are very important. Okay? Because sometimes if you mess up one of the positives and negatives, your numbers aren't going to work. Remember, both the two numbers have to multiply to C, and at the same time, they have to add or subtract to B, which means those positive negatives are going to play an important role here. Okay. Now you're probably looking at this and you're still not sure quite how to do it. So let's look at an example, and I'll show you exactly how this kind of works. Okay. And again, this is just one method of how to factor. I'll show you other factors down the line, but this is usually the one I've found that students like the most. Okay. So let's say they give us a trinomial that looks like this: x squared plus 10x plus 16. Now, we kind of already know the answer to this one because it's the one we put up top at the very beginning. Okay, so we know our answer should be, if you look at the top, x plus 8 and x plus 2. Okay, so we know what the answer is going to be. Let me show, let's see how we get there. Okay, so we set it up. Let's go ahead and draw an x on our paper. Okay, sometimes it helps to label the A, B, and the C, right? So A, B, and C. Now again, right now, all the questions we'll be looking at, the A value is that invisible 1, so we don't need to worry about that at all. Okay, we're going to focus in on ones that look just like that, where there's not really an A value right now. All right, so again, the C value is going to go up top. So that 16, that positive 16, is going up top. Okay, and then down below is the B value. Now the B value here is the 10, the positive 10. So we don't need to include the x on there. It's just the number in front of the x. Okay, so a positive 10 goes down below. Okay, now here's the hard part. We need to figure out what numbers multiply to 16, but also add or subtract to 10. Okay, now again, we already know what the answer is because it's at the top of the page. But let's say you didn't know what the answer was. And let's say you had a hard time figuring it out. So here's what I tell students to do. Off to the side over here, let's make a list of all of the ways you can multiply to 16. Okay, I mean, obviously we know what the answer is going to be, right? So we know that 2 times 8, that multiplies to 16. But let's say we didn't know that was the answer. I mean, we can think of what else multiplies to 16. Okay, well, 4 and 4 works. Okay, and there's always another one. The one that students always forget is that you can always multiply the number times 1, because that always works. So 1 times 16 should also go in this list. Okay, now we can look at this list and determine, okay, well, which two numbers here would also add to 10? Okay, well, 4 and 4 makes 8, so that doesn't work. So this is out. And 1 plus 16 gives you 17, so that's out. Okay, so this is a way you can kind of figure out what two numbers work, is you make a list of all the ways you can multiply to that C value, and then take a second look at that list and figure out, okay, which one of these groups of numbers adds to the b value. So in this case, we know that the 2 and the 16, or sorry, the 2 and the 8 actually works. Okay, so we can put that in here. Now I said the positives and the negatives are very important, right? So we need to make sure both of these are positive. Okay, so positive 2 and positive 8. Okay. Now I always tell students to double check to make sure that it works. Okay. Sometimes your first instinct doesn't work out properly. Okay, so always double check. Okay, so positive 2 times positive 8 gives you 16. So that's good. Check. And then positive 2 plus 8 gives you 10. All right, so that one's good as well. Once you're sure that it works, then we can set up our actual answer. Now, we know what our answer should look like, right? We're trying to break it into groups. And we know that the trinomial that looks like this, we know it's going to break into 2 groups. So what we do is we set up 2 sets of parentheses, and we put an x in front of both. Okay? Because we know our answer should look like that. Okay? And the whole idea of doing this x method is that those 2 numbers that go on the sides, the ones I have in green right there, those end up being what goes in your parentheses over here. So plus 2 and plus 8. Okay? And as long as you did the x method correctly, that's your answer. That's how we just factored it. We went from a trinomial down to a factored group of binomials. We broke it down. So this is the actual answer we're looking for when it says factor. Okay. The nice thing about these is that if you have the time, you can always go and multiply this back out and see if you did it correctly. Because if you multiply it back out, you should end up with the original question. Okay, so that's kind of a nice way on quizzes and tests. You can double check your work, make sure you did it correctly. Okay. Now this one's a fairly easy one. It gets a little more challenging when there's like positives and negatives mixed in. Okay, so let's do one more together. I know this is a longer video than normal, but this is a very important topic. Okay. All right, so let's say we wanted to factor x squared minus 8x plus 12. Okay. Go ahead and draw the x. Now I want to encourage you guys, if you want to try it out on your own, go ahead and pause the video and then press play after you've tried it. Okay. But if you're still kind of unsure of how to do these, again, feel free to kind of to watch along and kind of figure it out. Okay. So again, we need to put label our A, B, and C values. Again, our A is that invisible one, so something we don't need to worry about right now. Our B, this time, is the negative 8. And our C is a positive 12. So a little bit more challenging than the last one. Okay, so we set up our X. So remember the C value goes up top. So 12 goes up top, and then our B value goes down below. If it helps you to remember B goes down below, B and below. So make sure the negative goes with it, so negative 8. All right, so now we got to come up with a way of, what are the ways to multiply to 12, but add or subtract to negative 8? Okay, so we can make our list over here. We have to multiply to 12. Okay, so let's list the ways that we can multiply to 12. Well, the easy one, 1 times 12. Okay, we know 2 goes into 12, so 2 times 6 multiplies to 12. We know 3 goes into 12, so 3 times 4. And I think that's it. Yeah. All right, so now we can go look at those, and which one of these 3 sets of numbers would add or subtract to a negative 8. Okay. Well, 1 and 12, not going to work. Okay. 2 and 6, that adds to 8, which is very, very close, but we wanted negative 8. So maybe we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, 3 and 4, that adds to 7. Okay, so that's not going to work. Okay, so now we can look at the 2 and the 6. Okay, so again, very close, but it's not correct, right? It's 2 times 6 gives us 12, so this works, but 2 plus 6 gives us positive 8. So you got to think, what's a way that we can multiply to a positive number, but add or subtract to a negative number? Okay, and the answer to that is the only way that can possibly happen is that when you're multiplying to a positive but adding to a negative, is that both our numbers have to be negatives, right? Because a negative times a negative still gives us a positive. Okay, but then now when we're adding and subtracting, -2 minus 6, now that -8 works. Okay, so like I said, sometimes the negatives are tricky, and you got to kind of play around with it a little bit. Okay, these will get easier the more you do. It's something that practice makes perfect. Okay, so let's write out our answer. Remember, 2 sets of parentheses. Put the x up front. Okay, this time we had -2 and -6. So we put -2 and -6. Okay, and that would be our answer. And again, if you have the time, you can check if you multiply it back out, do that double distribution, you end up back with our original question.